Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Miniatures. Today we're going to have a nice little ramble about some of the latest models from Raging Heroes. Now unfortunately by the time this gets posted, it's probably past when these were released, but nevertheless you can always track them down and, well, it's a good excuse to just show off a bunch of the other stuff that I've got overwhelming my table currently. So recently we had a new style of release from Raging Heroes. We've had a couple of these dual sets, versus stuff. And like the title suggests, in this case, it's Ghouls and Goblins. Or Ghosts and Goblins. Or Ghouls and Ghosts. But no, we're going Ghouls and Goblins today. Sadly, we don't have any knights in golden armor with fiery dragon magic rolling around them. But maybe that's just triggering that PTSD of actually having sat through and tried to beat those old games and hearing the Dai Mokumura music starting to play in my head. But that's a whole different story. So, in this case, Raging Heroes decided to release a series of Goblins and Ghouls. And so rather than focus on all the boring line troops, which they went and then started a brand new tier for specifically army building type purposes, or RPG people, I opted to just stick with my tried and trusty heroes, because that's really what I'm all about. I like painting the more individual models, and so I don't know any of the names, but I don't think that really matters, because you're going to call them whatever you want. This particular individual, and I love the fact that maybe there's supposed to be a one-to-one relation with actual models out there. I couldn't tell you what they were. Some of them kind of look familiar. Some not so much, and I'm okay with that, and I think that's a good thing, because I think when artists and creators are unfettered from having to fit within certain confines, I think that's when we get really fun, creative stuff, and obviously we want to encourage that. We want more of that out there. So this guy, despite being a Raging Heroes model, with the pomp and circumstance that he seems to be bringing to the battlefield, very curly armor, lance, banners, poles, what have you, I get major Rackham vibes from this guy. And I know that they've done a couple variants with different helmets and heads. Sadly, these are not modular. It's just a one and done type deal. But considering he's on the 32mm base, he fills up a bit of space there. Now, what's interesting is that some of the other goblins are filling up just as much space. Take, for example, this fungal shaman here, who is kind of hard to see at first, especially when it's not in focus. You can see he's got mushroom growths all over him. You can see his nose and face right here. There is a lot going on with this model, and I'm just impressed that, I got it off in a single piece. I can't say the same for the base. There were tiny little mushrooms on just about all of the Goblin releases, and unfortunately they were so tiny that I ended up snapping a bunch off just in the process of getting the supports removed, unfortunately. So again, that is a 32mm base that our Goblin friend here is sitting on. And he has a much larger and dramatic hat. Again, I can't think of a real one-to-one relation for this guy in particular. A couple of the others I might, and I'm sure you might as well. Case in point, this figure, who is like our Goblin Queen. I like this one. There's a lot going on there. We've got, you can see the little kind of squiggy friend. We've got mushrooms of various styles going on all over the base. I am now seeing some supports that I missed in the sleeve there underneath her left arm, which is just me being nitpicky. With her cape being carried there, I think it's pretty obvious what character she's supposed to be, but then the fact that we have her on an oval base is even more interesting. Sadly, I own the real model, and I spent way too much time actually trying to find the model that she's supposed to be an interpretation of, and it strikes me as interesting that she's actually supposed to be kind of lengthwise instead, whereas the actual figure sits in the front, and then the train of her robes, or his robes, I don't even remember what gender that goblin was, but go the back way on the base. And in case you're curious just about the regular rank and file goblins that they've made, I've got one of their shooty ones here. There weren't a lot in the way of basic infantry guys. Yeah, he's super shiny at the moment, which is a shame. These were a challenge to get off the supports. These guys were pretty tough. Sadly, I didn't print any of the cavalry because I have been so backlogged with getting things painted. And at first I thought this guy was going to be kind of small, but when I actually went and grabbed a couple of random goblins from various peoples, you can see here that, you know what, maybe they're not all that different in size in the end. I want to say this is a Mantic one on the end, GW, obviously Raging Heroes, and one of the old Heartbreaker ones that Impact was putting out for a while there. I don't know if they still have these, but they're just really fun models anyways, especially if you like that kind of old hammer style, but that's a whole different story. So yes, while they're a little bit small, they're pretty much in scale with all the other goblins out there. I don't think they're going to be really out of place if you mix and match with other stuff, other than just the level of detail, I would say. And I was looking for some dwarves to prove a counterpoint, but I'm not really finding any. Got a Mantic one there. I was going to say I've got a Raging Heroes dwarf, but it is just a bit too much for our poor goblin friend here to handle. Which made me come to a realization that I've painted a ton of Raging Heroes stuff over the years since we've been 3D printing and they've had their Patreon and Heroes Infinite thing going on. So besides the goblins, we also have their ghouls, which I was particularly pleased with. Again, really, really detailed sculpts. Very small, delicate things that are going to be easy to break. So be quite careful with that. Usually I'm not a fan of models with viscera and gore on them, but I figured, what the hey. It looks pretty cool. Especially some of the more elegant ones. I don't like the pose so much with the one leg on the ground, but I do appreciate the fact that her cloak, at the very least, is keeping things stable and upright. With a typical ghoul there, just for scale's purpose. You can see these are going to be quite big and impressive figures, and that's even before we get into stuff like the more feral wild ones on the larger bases. Now, this guy here, I'm not 100% sure what happened with his sword. That's just weird. I don't know. Maybe it's just a big rusted, pointy thing. Maybe it wasn't a sword originally. I don't know. This was all one piece, too, outside of his base. That was pretty impressive in terms of just getting things removed. Same way we've got our judge over here. And what's interesting is, as I was saying, they have a new tier for more of the wargaming enthusiast type printers. So some of these models, I know her especially, had variants on the new tiers as well, in addition to all of the typical troop choices that they bring up. And it's interesting that I was trying to rack my brain to remember if we've ever seen any goblins prior to this release from Raging Heroes, and I really can't come up with anything. But again, that's me not really delving and actually looking at the computer ahead of time, because that would make too much sense. And who wants to make sense these days, right? We're all on vibes, I guess, nowadays. But one thing I can say is we have had ghouls and ghoul-related stuff in the past. I know in some of the vampire sets, we've had some very ghoul-like models. That's not a ghoul, obviously, but some of the vampires, definitely, that we've seen borderline on ghoul-like features and qualities. So there are some options out there if you want to pick and choose and mix and match from between some of the various Raging Heroes releases. There's a lot of fun stuff to be had there. I feel like this guy might have come from one of the vampire sets as well. And again, you know, with the quality of the models, I think a lot of this stuff, it's just going to look really cool together visually. And then, like, I just decided, well, you know what? Seeing how they pair with some of the other crazy stuff, I dug. And I mean, I really dug. I know that I have, like, a big, larger 40, 50, 60 millimeter based vampire monster, like, with tattered cloaks and robe type stuff all over him. I haven't come across them yet. But I came across, like, a ton of other Raging Heroes models. And here's another one from one of the undead releases with her arms, which I thought was kind of fun. Throw her in, actually. She might fit in well with the judge and the whole judiciary branch of the ghoul movement here. Like some of the random sci-fi stuff. What does this have to do with ghouls? Beats me. It's just a good excuse for me to put some of these models on the table because I like to, and guess what? It is my channel, and I will do as I please. Actually, though, it's interesting because I found a model, as we're getting to it eventually. Like, I forgot about this one. Or the fact that I think this penitent lady came from the same set. You can never have enough jailbirds. That one came out pretty nice, I think. Or demons. Been a lot of demons from Raging Heroes. Or chivalric knights. I really like my Green Knight. I thought he came out pretty decent. Or all the chaos. Or the angels. I mean, if you're going to have, you know, demons, you might as well have angels as well. But no, that's not actually what I wanted to talk about. I know that they had like a Shifting Sands or something like that was going to be one of the next releases. And actually made me dig up, and I found... I was disappointed to see that they weren't going the route. Now, this is an early Raging Heroes. This is like one of their first releases, I think, when they did their kind of Thieves Guild stuff. They had a lot of neat, you know, kind of Middle Eastern, Arabic-themed models. And it seems like they're still kind of going with it, but more of like a, you know, what was it? Not Thousand Suns. I don't remember what they're called. The Slaneshi stuff of late seems to have that kind of, you know, vaguely Arabian theme to it, but not to say that there haven't been all kinds of other fun releases. I just like when we've seen stuff like that, or like with their Celt release, you know, something different. And I keep nagging and saying, if anybody should ever do, especially with the Grand Cathay armies out there, this is just my chance to ramble on and toot my own horn and saying that, you know, we should see Raging Heroes do some full-on wuxia, xianxia, you know, Chinese epic fantasy, flowing cloaks and flying swordsmen dudes with like multiple swords all hanging around, some bandits. You know, I'm sorry, I grew up watching Kung Fu movies religiously, and when the whole DVD boom happened in the early 2000s, you best believe that me and Hong Kong were like best buddies, and I just absolutely devoured everything I can get my hands on. So I'm quite partial to the genre, despite having more familial ties to other parts of Asia. I absolutely want to see more Chinese stuff represented on the table. China has some really cool fantasy stuff out there, and just the themes and styles of the armor are something we don't see very often, and I really feel that it's something that Raging Heroes would absolutely excel at. So, if you agree, let me know your thoughts down below. If not, we got that link for you guys to check out their latest and greatest, because there's always something cool and fun when it comes to models from them. They've always been one of my big enjoyments. I'm just really curious and kind of hesitant to figure out what I'm going to do this month, because I really want to see what they're offering up for wargaming with their new releases, but I want to wait, and like, I don't want to spend a bunch of excess money if I don't have to, you know? So I'm like, I don't want to play with the website until I know one way or the other what we're getting ourselves into. So if you want to do that with me, we'll have that link down below, and hopefully you're going to find something fun down there yourself as well. So with that said then, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.